Well, at this point, we have to quickly move on to our engagement with Kolawole Johnson, Director, Research Strategy and Programming at Act for Positive Transformation Initiative, on the forthcoming 10th National Assembly, citizens' expectations, clamor for assertive lawmaking and effective oversight among the three arms of government. Good morning, Mr. Johnson. Good to have you join us again.
Good to be here again. Thank you for having me. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, so let's discuss the politics of the 10th National Assembly and how the principal officers will be selected. We're almost there. We're close to it. It's all coming up next week. How will you assess the politicking that has characterized the choices that the ruling party has been banding and the manner in which the opposition lawmakers seem to be also playing along and playing their own kind of politics? Are we about to witness a repeat of what we saw in 2011 and 2015, or do you think that this time around party supremacy would prevail?
All right. Inherent in man generally are some traits that if you don't check, they don't necessarily all blossom into radiant flowers. They can also become poisonous plant. Such is what you have at the state of nature. And in the democratic system too, the designers envisage that the executive would have the power to practically manage our life and control us. But they know that you can't leave all of these powers in the executive, that there should be some checks and balances. And there comes the National Assembly, the legislative arm, really. And the legislative arm too, in performing their duties of checks and balances, they don't do it most times smiling. They do it by asking questions. They do it by, querying actions of the executive. And this does not necessarily mean that they are not partners in progress. In fact, it is because they are partners in progress that they query, actions of the executive to ensure that the right things are done. After all, they make the laws, they give the approval for expenses, and they are also meant to look at what they have approved, if they have, if the executive has done well on them or not. However, based on the kind of environment we have, there are several factors that also come to play there. The first is what you've noticed in politics. Nigeria largely play politics of interest. It is what comes to the pocket first. So in performing these duties, there are questions to how sincere, the National Assembly members are in performing this duty. One, two. There are also, the question of merits because of our leadership recruitment process. Do we have the right people there to ask the right questions? And so because of this also, the executive will say, okay, let's also see if we can have those who can be friendly. Of course, you can't pocket old men. I mean, it's practically impossible. What we had in the last, in the 9th Assembly, of course, I don't want to say it's a shame, but it wasn't really, the very best, But if you want to have interest so that you don't stay on the path of, altercations, on the path of difference at all times, it is not a crime, so to speak. After all, you're meant to work together. Now, if you're on the side of the executive, no problem. That they are free to choose or they are free to, give directive on who they want. After all, they have the responsibility of the balance based on their party and to deliver to Nigerians. But if you're on the side of the National Assembly too, that says no. We must have our independence because, after all, we are voted in separately. And this arm of government is meant, to be separate and not to work with you. You can't choose for us. Perhaps they are right. But whichever side you stand, whether on the side of the executive that is looking for a friendly NAS or a NAS that wants to be independent, one thing that will be the baseline factor for us would be the characters of individuals that eventually emerge. It doesn't matter whether they are from side A or side B. Does these people have the competence, the character, and the compassion, to lead us properly in a way that you don't jeopardize development by fighting, constantly. You don't jeopardize development by ensuring that your pocket comes first. You know the problem of development in Nigeria. It is largely a part of it is situated in the National Assembly. Because when you approve budget, if you do the proper oversight functions, we won't have many of the shenanigans we have. But unfortunately, because a man wants to eat 10 kobo, 20 kobo, he doesn't care if you take, 100 naira. So because of that, we've not had the best, of our value for money in our polity. That is why you see that the value for money index in Nigeria is on our projects, is on our expenses. Maybe you don't get more than 30%. That is, if you've budget 100 naira, for example, for an item, the value you get maybe at times is not more than 100 naira. 30 naira, because most times corruption has taken away half of it. Even the remaining half is still shared by the stakeholders. And those who play the oversight function are part of this stakeholder. So we are not getting the very best. So the questions are we going to have the right persons who will ask the right questions? Either they belong to side A or side B. That should be the baseline factor. It doesn't matter where they come from. However, we have a fundamental problem too. That may also be, let me say, something to look at. We have the politics of identity playing out in Nigeria strongly, and you can't blame us. This is deep-rooted into our culture. One of the major consequences of the chronogram of ethnicism in Nigeria is the fact that we have the manifest reality of Nigerians owing allegiance, loyalty, first to their group, to their tribe, before the nation as a whole. So we have the identity crisis. You can hardly point to true Nigerians. We are forced to fall, we see ourselves first as part of an ethnic nationality before we see ourselves as Nigerians. So we have the dastardly potent instrument of ethnicization of politics and the politicization of ethnicity. So each person is fighting. It must come to my place. No, it must come to your place. So in this politics, a lot of times, we lose that sight of competence and the right person to bring the value on board. So whatever side or whichever way we say it, we should just pray that we have the very best of hands, regardless of the politics that they are playing right now. Okay, so talking about the race for the Senate presidency that is looking to have become more challenging as the two, some would say top contenders, former governors Godswill Akpabio and Abdulaziz Yari, at loggerheads over the number of lawmakers loyal to their camps. Now, I want to ask you this. Is religion a factor? Right now, we have the president and the vice president being, both Muslims, or seeing this Muslim ticket being the argument for some factions. Do you think that it's coming as a disadvantage to have, the Senate president as well being a Muslim, or should that not be part of the conversation at all? I don't know why you will even ask if it should be a factor. Let us embrace functional realism. Let's not shy away from the reality of our nation. You know that when the president, during the contest, went for a Muslim vice, despite being a Muslim, of course, the EU and cry that greeted that was something else, because we have the fundamental questions in our society. Religion is there, and we can't run away from that. And because we are all suspecting ourselves, Mr. A is suspecting B, you don't trust Mr. A to protect your interest. So to create a balance, it's like, okay, let all be represented. So when that came, some of us knew it was only for the purpose of winning the election, not necessarily because, they wanted to have a one-sided, race. But that race is gone. And now we have the chance of balancing that as a nation. Else, you will be ostracizing. a religion completely in the country. Some have asked, oh, if you're talking about the Christians, Muslims, how about the traditional rulers? Oh, yeah, of course. But we know that some are dominant. The Christians and the Muslim faith, they are dominant. We can run away from that. So if you have the president who is a Muslim and a vice president who is a Muslim, we should have at least the Senate president, the number 3, who would not be a Muslim. And I think the party looked into that by having, by zoning to the South, so they can have a Christian Senate president. I think where the mistake came was, putting a name to it. If they had zoned that to the South, we will most likely have, you can zone that openly in your letter, then call your party members to say, okay, this is where we are going to. You don't necessarily have to put names to it on the letter, but they made that mistake, of course, and the National Assembly guys are fighting. But in fighting also, they are not considering the general picture of Nigeria on the fact that we need to have a balance. The identity politics is there. We can't run away from it. So, for me, the religion question should be, in fact, not just a factor, a major factor in this process of choosing who will become the number 3 in the National Assembly. And unfortunately, if you check the House of Representatives, number 4, it's almost defined for a Muslim. Those who are in the race, from Wase to Betara, to Gaji to Jaji, and the Abbas, the most favored, by the party, they are all Muslims. So we are like, of course, that is becoming like a straight race for a Muslim, to lead the lower chamber. You can also have a Muslim in the upper chamber. That means you will have the president, the vice president, the senate president, the speaker, the chief of staff, all Muslims. No. I think we should do better as a nation by being sensitive to the reality of the moment. So religion, is a factor, should be a factor, should be a factor. And they should all consider that even in their own quest for personal gain. They should please consider the larger picture. They should consider Nigeria. They should please consider the reality and the sentiments and the mood of the nation by ensuring that we have at least the number 3, not also coming from the same faith that will have the first 4 from that same faith. Especially with the comments we heard recently from Kaduna, it would be so unfortunate if we end up with, with that lineup. So please, let's note that religion is a factor. Of course, you can take away competence also. In fact, that should be the number 1 factor. But you don't have the monopoly of competence in any religion. It cuts across. So we should look for the very best amongst those that will also balance the religious question.
All right, Mr. Johnson, I like, the tone that you're using and the broad canvas of why identity, which of course includes religion and ethnicity, should be a factor that must be carefully looked into. But it will look to me like the North may not be looking at religion directly, but they are looking at zone. And you must have followed the argument of stakeholders in the North saying that with at the South producing the president, producing the CJN, etc., that they demand, as a matter of factly, that both leadership of the National Assembly should come to the North. And of course, you know that when it comes to the North, it will most likely be Muslim. I would love your thoughts on that and the demand of the stakeholders in the North. But I would also like you to put a broad canvas assessment on the Ninth Assembly itself as a form of agenda setting.
Sorry, Can you hear me? I can hear you if you're hearing me, please. I can't hear anything, please.
Oh, okay. We can hear you. Can you hear me now? Because I can hear you.
Yeah. I could see you talking, but I can't hear anything. Yeah.
Okay. All right. We'll come back to you to sort that while we give our technical team just a few seconds to deal with that. So, Shaitan, Kolawole Johnson was making an important point about why we can't close our eyes to the reality of identity, formation and religion and ethnicity in matters like this, which to me will sound like that will favor Godswill Akpabio, former governor
I mean, from the south.
of Akwa Ibom, you know, or maybe somebody from the southeast, for example. I mean, Orji Kalu says he's still in the race. He's from the southeast, he's a Christian, but it doesn't look like he has much of the political power to negotiate for that position, given the paltry vote that his geopolitical zone gave to Asiwaju Bola Ahmed Tinubu's emergence as the president.
Of course, and you know, I can't wait for Tuesday to come. You know, I feel like we've been having this conversation for a very long time, but it's very important. The Senate president is going to be, you know, we're looking at the president, the vice president, and then that's like the next person that we're looking towards. And then in this conversation about who emerges as the leader of the Senate and the House of Representatives, I feel like we are not necessarily hearing much about competence, even though we know that all these people are competent. But I wish that the push or the lobbying was, okay, this is what I can do, this is what I can bring to the table, as opposed to just a conversation about religion, zoning, okay, not central, not where, like, you know, and you know, it can be very dicey because, you know, I was asking Mr. Kola now, is it a factor? And he was very insistent that it is. We cannot have, you know, a Muslim ticket and then have the third person being a Muslim. But then I was talking to the head of the northern delegation about two days ago, and he had mentioned that, just like you said, that we had other important stakeholders. I mean, the head of the please remind me of the CGN, not necessarily being a Muslim. So there were other leadership positions that are already being filled by other religions. So it's not necessarily as if the focus is just being on you know, the first three men in our society just being Muslims. But I can't wait to hear what his response is, especially when it comes to the Ninth Assembly, who is making its way out. Yes. There's been a lot of back and forth. I think we have him back.
All right, Mr. Johnson, can you hear me now? Good to have you back.
Thank you. Good to be back too.
Okay, thank you very much. So I was asking you about the fact that, yes, I liked what you said in your analysis, and I wanted you to tie that to the northern stakeholders' statement demanding that the leadership of both houses, the Senate and the House of Representatives, should come to the north, given the fact that the South has the president, the South has the CJN, and a few other positions that they mentioned. So I wanted to know your thoughts on that. And I also wanted you to assess critically the Ninth Assembly, which is about to expire, you know, on Tuesday. You said something about, you know, a bit of their activities being a joke, but I wanted you to look at it from three main pillars. One, the pillar of the oversight function. Two, that of the number of bills, you know, that they passed. And if indeed they were rubber stamp or people were just being unfair to them, what would be your assessment?
All right, let me start from the second part of the question. First, the Ninth Assembly did exemplary well when it comes to their first duty in terms of lawmaking. You know, numbers of bills, you know, passed and much of the things around that. They did well, even in intervening in crisis, you know, from even in reform, the electoral process. So they did quite well. If you look at electoral law before, cases will go unending. But of course, you've seen reforms that reduce the number of months the appeal court for the presidential cases to 6 months. And the Supreme to only 3 months. So we're getting there, of course. We'll be asking for further reform, you know, from the 10th Assembly. Sure, you know, we're already meeting for that. However, look at the things they did in that direction. They did fairly well, very well. But in their roles of oversight function, I think they perform below average. We should say that by being fair to, you know, by just being fair to the system, by saying below average, we should say very poor, because most I don't understand why you approve loans without asking question. And when they come in for the next one, you will call, yeah, come and give account of the last one that you got. And they won't even come. You have executive rascality, taken to some dimension, with the Ninth Assembly, where you summon some people, they refuse to come, and the president will not call them to order. Yet the same president will send something, and you give it express approval. We have the system, that says, oh, Baba said. I mean, we didn't have it too well in the area of oversight function. And even in supervising the ministries and the agencies, we didn't have it too well. I think the 8th Assembly did much more better, in querying the activities of agencies, commissions, and, different, from, different sector, But the 9th Assembly, I think, did extremely poor in that direction, and we have facts. I mean, there are several things to point to that. What is your rate of performance in terms of budget? You see money spent, and you don't see the value of that project on ground. That is the failure of National Assembly, and they come by. See, when they bring their budget in the following year, the first thing you ask for is budget performance of the previous year. And what questions do you ask? In those loopholes, don't you ask questions? You've seen the shenanigan of the Nigerian Air. You have the committee of the House. You have the committee of the Senate on aviation. What exactly did they do? So if you are looking at them from the part of their first duty of making laws, they've done well, fairly well, even, especially the House of Reps. Give it to them. And when it comes to the oversight function, they did, below average. It was below average. You can't really put anything on that. Then on the first question you asked me, can you please rephrase the first question again? Then I can take it properly.
Yes, I said that I liked how you put the identity question and putting religion and zone into it. But I wanted you to link that to what a few stakeholders have said from the north. Saying
I can hear you again. Okay.
All right. Am I back? Can you hear me now?
All right, go ahead.
Okay, I wanted
Yes, I can hear you.
All right. I wanted you to tie to...
Okay, I got the question now.
All right.
Yeah, I got the question. Now, that is the same thing I told you about before when I was laying my foundation. See, the major issue we have in our polity, I have told you, it is the chronogram of ethnicism. The manifest reality in our system is that of Nigerians, people owing allegiance first to their identity, either in tribe or religion. First of all, before seeing themselves as Nigerians, and that is so unfortunate. So we have a situation where, you can talk of ethnicization of politics and politicization of ethnicism. It is the question of identity. You hardly see yourself as a Nigerian. You see yourself as, coming from one nationality or the other. And that problem is rooted in our foundation. I keep saying this. In 1960, when we were to come together, prior to that time, we didn't have the plebiscite across the country to say, okay, do you want to be part of this union? It was the first union. And you look at, other countries with that, USSR, Yugoslavia, you have this problem also inherent in them. So when people are comparing us to the US, the UK in terms of our politics, they don't really, want to face the reality of what we have as our internal dynamic. So that is there. And unfortunately, it has raised its ugly head again. But you can't really determine the leadership of the judiciary. If the North is asking for that, can we also be talking about how the North also dominated the security architecture of the country in terms of the leadership all through? In how many years? They were there. They were there. In fact, most of the part of the country complain, of course, to no avail, nothing happened. The judiciary also, you've been having the North leading the system, over time. So there was no question about that. I think we should politicize what we can. And please save some system, and save some institution from our politics. You don't see. In the military, you can forgive some few things because people rise. It is by ranking. But you still go ahead to ensure that people are retired untimely just to get to who you want. In the police, in the Navy, that happened. In the, of course, across the security line. But the judiciary is different. The ranking is there. When it comes to the one we can control, that we can use to balance the system, we shouldn't raise the questions about that. The history of this country has been that, okay, what happened in the, let's run through the last 8 years. You have the Senate presidency staying, in the North Central. The first 4 years, 2015 to 2019. Before then, you had David Mack, 8 good years, straight row from the North Central too. Then the North has been having this. Again, you have the Northeast having the Senate presidency for 4 years. So for 16 years, we have, is it 16? More than 16 years, for 20 good years. So you've had the Senate presidency staying back in the North. So what are we saying? So if we say it should shift to the South now, it is only asking for fairness. I think that is a normal thing. But unfortunately, you have people that want to ensure that their interests, are protected first. So that is why you have people clamoring for things to come to their religion. But we should ask ourselves, the number of times you've had this in your places, what have you gotten for it? Let me give the example of the Southeast. So the entire southeastern state, from Ebonyi that had Ayim, the great Chuba Wilberforce Okadigbo, Anambra State. You had Ewerem, is it from Imo, thereabout? You have Wabara, Abia, you have Kenamani, Enugu. All the states of the southeast, they've all, they've all presided over the Senate. As a matter of fact, in the first maybe 20 years of this democratic experiment in this republic, are we aware that you've had the Southeast being part of the presiding officers, either as the Senate President or the Deputy Senate President for good 20 years. The first 8 years, Senate Presidency, and the next 12 good years, the Deputy Senate Presidency. Unfortunately, you still have all manner of the same things you have across the country, the same challenges also you have in the Southeast. So if we would do it for the benefit of just, let's have fair play, let's have fairness across the country, let's promote equity, we should do it, not because it will translate to some magical development in your place. So we should please ensure that we consider other parts of the country for this. And I think the APC got it right by saying, okay, the South should have it. However, putting the name to it was a problem that they have.
All right, then. Thank you, Mr. Kolawole Johnson, Director, Research Strategy and Programming at the Act for Positive Transformation Initiative. Thank you so much for being here on The Morning Show.